Plan Arcadia is a repeat of Penacony again, and main quest for 4.3 is plainly another 2.3. That's right, Hoyoverse is trying to bamboozle us again, and we fell asleep right at the start of the patch.
ほらベルト、疲れてるだろうし、もうちょっと寝かせてあげましょう。
那如果有一片巨大的梦境，它足够逼真，逼真到与现实无异。那里没有生离死别，每个人都能收获应得的美满与幸福，并永远快乐地生活下去。请问，你会愿意栖身其中吗？那，倘若这美梦注定支离破碎，任何事物都将离去，朋友、亲人、陌生人，然后是轻快的风，飞翔的鸟儿，群星，最后是你自己。每一个人，他们记忆中的每个人，那些笑容和眼泪，完成与未能完成的约定，最后都将迈向既定的终局。如果在启程之初，你便已知晓此行的终点，请问，你还会踏上这段旅途吗？我们都将在那里找到答案。
Of course, the mechanism for our looping this time is a bit different from that of Penacony in that we got heavy hints from Welt that we used our Stellaron to change reality.
君とマンガンの戦いの様子は映像で見た。テレビタワーの頂上に戻った時、君から何か巨大な力が放たれたように見えたんだ。宇宙ステーションヘルタで君と最初に会った時によく似ている。もしかして性格の力を使ったのか。性格の力は願いによって呼び覚まされるようだが、その強大すぎる力は現実を歪ませてしまう。数千万の人々の眼力が押し寄せれば、そこには美しい願いや祝福だけでなく、企みや悪意も当然含まれている。それらが性格にどのような影響をもたらすか、俺たちには知る由もない。どれほど便利に思えても、その力は慎重に扱った方がいいだろう。
But why do we need to loop in the first place? And aside from us, is there anyone who is actively looping? And more importantly, why do the jellyfish swim? Disclaimer, spoilers for Fate Grand Order's latest main chapter, because somehow the two games managed to sync again. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall of Nasu and Roasted Chicken's meetings. As I have predicted back in 4.0, the whole plot we are seeing now in Plan Arcadia is an edited timeline, existing in parallel to the true timeline in a Schrödinger cat box. Back in 4.0, we were shown that the Astral Express exploded because we made the wrong choice, and Evanesha further clarified that the explosion was part of a chain of cause and effect that was kept away for too long. In 4.2, Hoyo finally released a lore-shattering lore book called Approaching Science, The Mysterious Dark Zone, which confirms to us that Mythos can do a ripples in the Dirac Sea and jump into the Ether Zone, the star rail equivalents of the Dirac Sea and the causal Fermi Sea system, to reset the universe. The details of it are rather technical, and I have addressed this back in 4.2, so if you want to learn more on the subject, you can check out that video for a more detailed explanation. Anyway, the gist of it is that Mythos has the exact same power set as Fuli and can swim back into the past to change the present, thereby changing the outcome of the present. This makes sense because back in Gold and Gears, Hoyo already told us that Mythos was the garden pure child pretending to be Fuli, which further connects us to a very suspicious character in Plan Arcadia, Nihilix, who claims to be the garden boss who sent the Memo Keepers after March and Cyrene back in Amphireus.
これまではメモキーパーをゴシップ記者に雇ってネタを仕入れてたんだけど、オンパロスでみんないなくなっちゃって、今すごくネタ不足なの。けどもし請求列車の関係者が現月遊戯の進展をこっそり教えてくれたら、最新話を読んだ読者はきっと。うっそ、二次元ホース先生ってタイムマシンでも持ってるの？
Of course, it is incredibly suspect that the approaching science lore book about Mythos resetting was released in 4.2, one patch before 4.3. In other words, the Jellyfish swims because she wants to change the content of her comics. From the start, the Astral Express actually exploded before it became whole again in the comic. The pre-release trailer further told us that we actually died against Nanook, and this is our reset to save ourselves, orchestrated by Aha and Mythos. Furthermore, in 4.1, the side quest king titled itself as Side Quest, and while it can be argued that it's just a character quirk of Silver Wolf, the literal reset in the music video is much harder to deny. Then, in 4.2, Silver Wolf was officially released, her traces stating that there are two endings, and she's speedrunning the false ending to unlock the true ending. In addition, Nihilix also showed up just in time to help us livestream and gather wish power against Full Wish, and from what Welt suggests to us this patch, that entire show was likely a warped reality crafted by our Stellaron and people's wish power, and the original ending is likely a bad one where our Stellaron either explodes or grants them malice in people's collective wishes at the time. It was in that same patch that Nihilix gave us the baseball bat that would become our weapon on the Elation path, and it was in the same patch that the approaching science lore book was released. In 4.3, it was no coincidence that she claims to be thinking of a plot for the fake versus real Himeko plotline, which happens to be the very content addressed in 4.3 and 4.4.
ほら、この古い石像を見てよ。どことなくヒメニャンに似てない？ちょうど化けヒメニャンのシーンを描いてるところなんだ。ちょっと拝ませてもらおうと。もしかするとグラフィアがいきなり現れてネタを授けてくれるかも。
However, those are not the only suspicious details in the quest so far. The first time we met the fake Graphia in the snow, it was revealed that that was Asat Pramad in disguise, and the person also at the scene was Nihilix, who had slowly led us into the mountain snow area in the first place. Of course, in a previous scene, she also specifically highlighted the Wispe cube, who was actually Asat Pramad in disguise, going so far as to invent a reason for him to avoid our suspicions. Also, in the lore book, she is aware of the fourth wall of our world, and she also made several jokes about the upcoming Fate collab, so that girl is definitely not a normal character at all. And where Mythos goes, Aha is close by, because these two have been attested to be working together since Gold and Gears to counter Noose Instant. And the whole plot of Gold and Gears with the synesthesia beacon acting as a transmitter for the anti-organic equation is being repeated in verbatim here in Plan Arcadia, so we can be reasonably sure that on the story writer's end, both Mythos and Aha are actively working together to write the contents of the loops, while our Stellaron and personal finality power are the mechanism for the looping itself. After all, it was not for no reason that we told Yao Guang about our finality power right in 4.0, while in the same patch, Yao Guang also yapped about Plan Arcadia as a wave functions of multiple results. So in other words, a cat box, and we and Himeko are the cat in the box.
占卜未来本质上是一种观测与计算，是对未来的干涉，而每一次测算都会将混沌不清的未来推向某个确定的坍缩结果，即便这结果并不为人所乐见。不瞒你说，动身前往这二项乐园时，本座确实做好了亲自踏入幻月游戏的打算，但在面具入手的瞬间，我已明了佩戴它的后果。这件奇物一旦加深，观自在眼将超脱目光所限，便入此界。十轮天志冥王会以每秒100亿次计判读众生的未来。
你是说，只是靠你双眼观察，我们的未来就会被决定？
不错， 就像变质天君缠眼天道，毛下命定的时刻。如果戴上面具，我就成了这二香乐园之上的博识尊。我会亲眼将诸位推入黑暗的命运，囚锁在命定的死局里，再无一点拯救的希望。
But in the first place, while that Graphia in the snow was definitely fake, there was no guarantee that the second Graphia who showed up was the real one and not a story cooked up by either Asat Pramad or Mythos. In fact, right when she showed up, we specifically made a comment that she came from the downstream, not the upstream of the river.
変なの。船が下流から上がってきたの。
Naturally, when that Graphia of doubtful authenticity drew the world in canvas and the entrance to the Ouroboros Maw, she drew it out of Blade's mind. So obviously, that was not the actual world in canvas, and the death that Blade experienced is but an illusion of death. As the quest has told us right from the very start, it is but a moon in the water, flowers in the mirror, denoting unreachable things, an illusion that does not actually exist. After we completed that scene with the snow Graphia, we got a phonograph named Blank Space. Dust settles on the tiles, glazing them with a patina of time. In the tarot deck, the moon card depicts animals in the water, representing hidden danger underneath the wave. The road ahead is a winding path leading to the Tower of the Destruction, misleading us with the lunacy of the moonlight, or as the event of this patch has lampshade, the dark zones in the ether sea of Mythos. Well, yes, Nihilix just used the red text associated with Mythos from Acheron's story in broad daylight, telling us of a reference to Danganronpa. And the event is us hunting for survivors in the dark zone. Surely, absolutely nothing is wrong with this event and the red text she used. But also, back to Blade, Silverwolf was totally correct in questioning where Blade got his new coat from. That is a very important question that Blade kinda just skirted, and you can tell that Silverwolf was quite exasperated in playing along, because she already told us that she's a story skipper and will speedrun false endings.
でもさ、服まで着替えちゃうなんて、下で何かあったの？
獣の口を利用して出骨を幽閉してきた。だが、それはさまつなことだ。
Another obvious issue is that if that was actually the real Maw of the Ouroboros, then what is the Maw over here behind Pearl? In 4.1, we already knew from the suspicious ego and the nameless Wispe there that that is the actual Ouroboros Maw, as Aha the lovesick fool who wants to ditch their own authority to resurrect Akivili is confirmed to be inside that Maw. So if that's the real Maw, then this Maw that Blade jumped into, alongside the entire fight segment with Graphia afterwards, is not an authentic memory, it is an edited one under the influence of Mythos. I don't know if it's a technical issue for this patch or it's intentional lore-wise, but as of right now, we can't review the fight cutscene with Graphia in the Fade Atlas. And well, if you watch the Blade cutscene slowly, you'll notice that sometimes between his confrontation against the Suhu flower and remaking himself into a sword, he has somehow lost half of his body and his arm, so clearly, there is a fight scene somewhere here that we missed the context of. Of course, those are not the only discrepancies in this patch so far. The most glaring one is actually Danheng's decision to not follow Blade, as in a previous patch, he stated the complete opposite and claimed that he would follow Blade closely. This means that 4.3 follows the Danheng interpretation of the Finality Hexagram with the two dragons as the two halves of Blade back in 4.2, but this is an interpretation that Yao Guang did not entirely buy. The original interpretation of that hexagram is Blade either fighting with or against Danheng, which actually was shown to us as one of the possible timelines in Asat Pramad's dice. The resolution for that hexagram shown to us in 4.3 also did not address the hidden dragon leading from the Preservation's hexagram to the Finality's hexagram, meaning that because the issue between Blade and Danheng were not actually addressed, it will lead to a big boss fight between the other two dragons. The two eyes of Ouroboros stolen from Hokusai's Great Wave off Kanagawa, and by the time of 4.2, it was clear that the two moons in the painting or the two pearls of the Ouroboros here are supposed to be Pearl, who probably has an Innefa plot as a robot with Hokusai theme, and Kuchiba, Furthermore, it helps that Asat Pramad himself also slipped up during that scene, when he started yapping about Himeko being the true Nameless, while we, as the inverse Akivili, and also a real deal Nameless, are standing right there.
あんたがあまりにも退屈だったからさ。だが状況が変わった。あんたよりずっと面白いやつが帰ってきたんでな。彼女は本物の七死人だ。あんたと違って。だから俺はここに戻ってきた。ただこれを伝えるためだけに。
Himekoのこと。
Speaking of Himeko, for the astute, you have probably noticed that the entire narrative about our Himeko being fake was conducted solely by two parties throughout the quest, Asat Pramad and Nihilix. You can actually notice that Himeko never actually confirmed it herself, and whenever she tried to tell the story, Asat Pramad kept interrupting her. And even in his narrative, our Himeko still has the weathering curse on her legs, which would contradict his hypothesis that she is a fake imaginee. Because if she is another imaginee, her legs wouldn't have had the curse of the original Himeko in the first place. High-key, I think this is another case like Cyrene, where they tried to bait us into thinking that the big demiurge isn't the small Cyrene before the plot twist of 3.7. Firstly, Asat Pramad was flat-out wrong about the Trailblaze always converging with the destruction, as the result of the Amphireus experiment has told us repeatedly, and as 3.8 has told us through Firefly's plot about our existence as the Finality's cat. In this case, the destruction is the death of Himeko through the weathering curse, the mark of destruction inherited from Graphia. And you can plainly tell that Asat Pramad's explanation of the curse being solely the mark of destruction does not align with what we have known of in the lore book, that there is a gender difference component, so something with genetics is definitely involved. Also, the Starlight Bandit set off a Stellaron during the fight against Asat Pramad as the demon lord from beyond the sky back then, so an additional component involving the Stellaron's corrosive effect could have been part of the weathering curse as well, in a mirror to Firefly's condition as the other cat in the box of Penacony. And against Asat Pramad hypothesis, the fate of the Hime cat is still inside the cat box of Plan Arcadia. Secondly, Himeko claimed early in the quest that a nameless guided before she set out and told her to find her companions, and from the wording of that nameless was likely Himeko herself, which would align with the time loop told to us through Himeko's story back in Year 1. Thirdly, Miss Dolly knew of our Himeko and actually was the mecha who materialized to protect against Asat Pramad at the end of the quest. You can see her face right here at the top, so if our Himeko was entirely fake, her relationship with Miss Dolly would not make sense. Fourthly, directly in the quest, both Himeko and Ryusuke were paralleled to Miss Dolly, who already claimed back in 4.0 that she met a parallel version of herself when she crossed a black hole. That parallel version made a different choice, which supports the interpretation that our Himeko is really the real Himeko, just as another result in the cat box of Plan Arcadia, rather than a completely fake version, as Asat Pramad has claimed. At the same time, this parallelism also aligns with what I have predicted since 4.0 and confirmed in the tavern scene. The Ryusuke speaking here is the actual Ryusuke, just one possessed by a mask, and Asat Pramad is but a mask capable of existing in multiple places at the same time because he can possess multiple people. It is, of course, just as Miss Dolly has told us from the start. Hearing is deceptive, seeing is believing. That's just choosing one of the two most common illusions, and in this case, it is the illusion of death for both Himeko and Blade as the two fire in the lake of Yao Guang Hexagram. Speaking of Yao Guang Hexagram, the one that she cited in the quest is highly suspect as well. Before this patch, she usually quoted the hexagram lines verbatim in the Chinese version, but in this patch, she actually quoted a sentence from the commentary rather than the judgment line itself, so that was already quite unusual. The content itself is also quite illuminating. The hexagram 38 is between lake and fire, describing two forces that seemingly work against each other but actually are working together under the same principle, like heaven and earth. Within the context of the patch itself, we can roughly map this to the relationship between the abundance tree and Ouroboros corpse, between Blade and his reforging of Suhuo into a weapon against Yao Xue, but at the same time, we can also map this line to the big boss fight of the patch, between Graphia and Asat Pramad as two forces secretly working together so truly that Graphia is very suspicious. Later in the patch, another inconsistency exists in the background of Graphia, as told to us by Aha and her as well. According to both of them, Graphia was just a normal baby found by Asat Pramad and raised for fun. But as we all know, Aha is a lying liar who lies, and her boss description calls Asat Pramad her creator instead of father, heavily implying that Graphia is a painting, just as the reference to Kioe and her name has always suggested since 4.0. But more importantly, this is a lie that both Graphia and Asat Pramad were in cahoot with together, so that version of Graphia and Asat Pramad don't seem to disagree that much. At the same time, the end of the hexagram tells us plainly that we are being duped because of our isolation, confirming to us that yes, this patch is another 2.3, which aligns nicely with the direct reference to White Knight in the patch article. The next inconsistent detail was not actually discovered by me, but by a Reddit user in the Hoyoverse scaling sub. I didn't notice the teleportation on my first watch and hadn't got to that part on the second watch yet back then, but the Reddit user noticed that Welt used his wormhole to teleport Yao Guang like 2 meters away, which, as we know from the sheer energy needed to generate that wormhole in the first place, does not make a lick of tactical sense. Normally, without the rest of the discrepancies, we can chalk this up to just Hoyo being sloppy with the direction of the fight. However, the issue here is that this teleportation also violates a parallelism to the Alien Space comic that did not happen. As we all know, our Welt is also the same Welt from Honkai Impact, and he set off to the Star Rail world at the end of the Alien Space comic. At the end of that comic, he also confronted Ryusuke, who was an Enlightenment nutcase sounding suspiciously like Herta and Batavia.
But it's still not enough. Step out of the circle at your feet and look down from a higher world.
That version of Ryusuke wants humanity's progress at all cost, so Welt sent him to the first singularity of the Big Bang event through a wormhole, expecting the guy to die. Under the assumption that the first singularity would have killed him, sending a black hole at the guy's face would have been a logical move, which did not happen here, even though it's the same two parties in the fight, creating an illogical fight scene. Ergo, the parallelism was broken, and together with every inconsistency in this quest, it is likely deliberately broken by the writers for players to become aware that something is subtly wrong in this fight. Much like how 2.2 broke so much lore, I plainly predicted the plot twist 2 years before 3.8. And that fake ending in 2.2 and 2.3 was also written by Constance with the Remembrance power and Sparkle from the Elation team. On another note, with how the same wordings of looking from a higher dimension and the first singularity are used for Alien Space Ryusuke, Herta, and Batavia, I'm pretty sure that the Alien Space Ryusuke likely just got sent to Noose, because Batavia willingly did the exact same things, following the solitary ripples in the imaginary river to arrive at the first singularity, where Noose resides. This is why I said that Miss Dolly's plot of meeting her parallel selves while passing a black hole likely appears to Ryusuke as well, and it also applies to Aha too, because after Akivili died, and he went off to the edge of the world, Aha, as Isee and Asat Pramad had lost faith in the Trailblaze, laughing as they saw themselves as a crying baby falling off the imaginary tree and swallowed by the Ouroboros, turning their original power of playing dice with gods through the uncertainty principle into the constancy of Asat Pramad's dice. Speaking of Asat's dice, this patch also officially confirms that his power set is choosing one probability over others, as I have predicted in 4.0. I have explained the physics behind it back in 3.5, 3.6, and 4.0, but for a short summary of the physics behind it, the powers of the Elation, the Enigmata, the Remembrance, and the Erudition were all inspired by the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics and the uncertainty principle. In quantum mechanics, it's impossible to determine both the position and momentum of a particle at any given time. For example, in chemistry, you have probably learned that electrons move around the nucleus as a probability cloud, also known as orbital, and we can't describe the electron's exact position and its momentum, so that's why the orbital is a cloud and not the exact coordinate. This is called the uncertainty principle, which was previously cited by Hoyo in the description of the Mythos knot, and obviously is the true nature of Mythos power set. As a result, because of the uncertainty principle, we can say that God plays dice, and in Star Rail, the god who plays dice is the Elation.
你听过这样的问题吧？如果有机会让世界科技进步100年，却要牺牲一只小猫咪，你愿意吗？哇哦，很冷酷嘛！恭喜你，你和这个世界选择了一样的回答。
In the Schrödinger cat box, the cat can be alive or dead, depending on probability. The mathematical formula of the cat state can be considered a wave function, which will collapse when we open the box, and the result is verified by the observer. The Schrödinger cat box was the reference for Amphireus, with Iron Tomb and Cyrene as the two possible states of the cat, and it was also directly cited by Sparkle for Plan Arcadia and Himeko's fate. In 4.1, in an equation in Divergent Universe, Aha was stated to be able to temporarily disperse the probability cloud, as in, they can determine one result over the other, albeit temporarily. So in effect, the power sets of Aha and Mythos are very similar to each other, and both fundamentally are based on the uncertainty principle, even though their mechanisms are different. Mythos relies on the Ether Sea, as in the Dirac Sea and the Casual Fermi system, to reset the cycles, while Aha and Asat Pramad use magic, as in literally wish power, a form of imaginary energy, to change the probability of reality, much like how the Stellaron can warp reality with the wish power it collects. Of course, in direct opposition to both the Elation and the Enigmata is the Erudition, representing scientific determinism, and the observer, who can collapse the wave function of the catbox. As I have explained before in 3.5, there is an interpretation that time as we perceive it doesn't really exist. Only instants of the present actually exist, and the future already happened. Thus, in Star Rail, by observing an instant, Nous can anchor that instant into a certainty and lock all wisdoms into the erudition. As Polka has stated in Unknowable Domain, with their instants, Nous and their literal scientific determinism has created a perfect model of the universe, where the future has already happened, and we are only living in the past of the grand design, which is depicted as a Penrose staircase in Hawking's book of the same name. As a result of this, for Nous, the ending is predetermined, and no matter how much the Enigmata, the Elation, and the Equilibrium tried to delay it in gold and gears, they could not change the end result of Nous instance. They would not stand by and do nothing as the war raged on. However, the moments calculated by Nous did come true one after another as though no forces had interfered with them. Perhaps some Eons did or did not attempt to do so. Incidentally, since the last Fate collab turned out to be major foreshadowing for both Grand Order After Time and Star Rail in 3.8, I think it would be beneficial to discuss a little bit of Fate lore here. The thing is that Rin here in the splash art is wielding the Jewel Sword of Zelrich, who is the user of second magic in the Nasuverse. For a short gist, there are 5 magic in the Nasuverse, representing 5 tasks humanity has left. Of the 5 magic, 2 stand out as having clear reference to real-life physics, and through the real-life physics, to Star Rail path system as well. The 5th magic, currently wielded by Aoko, is ultimately based on the heat death of the universe, which overlaps significantly with Goetia in Grand Order and with Nanook in Star Rail. Well, I would say that it's not a coincidence that Goetia's human design and golden scapegoat aesthetics looks so much like Phanon and Nanook. The other magic is second magic of Zelrich, whose power is operation of parallel worlds. Specifically, he actually sits in one place most of the time beyond time and space, and by observing a timeline, he can make it a reality, so he's basically the Nasuverse version of Nous. He's actually a bit more like a combo of Nous, Mythos, and Aha all together, mostly because second magic draws on all aspects of the uncertainty principle instead of splitting it into many eons like Hoyo does. Zelrich can also travel between parallel worlds for the fun of it and lends other people a small part of second magic through various artifacts, such as the Kaleidostics in Prisma Ilia and the Jewel Sword held here by Rin. In the Fate canon, Rin mostly shoots beams with it, but it will be interesting to see if Nasu and Hoyo would justify Rin's presence in Star Rail with a combo of the Jewel Sword and Ishtar. Speaking of Fate collab, Nihilix made some odd comments about it as well in this patch. In the main quest, when we were talking about summoning Graphia, a ritual which we now know is bogus, Nihilix specifically brought up Saber's case in the Holy Grail War. The issue is that in Stay Night, Saber was not actually dead. She is the King Arthur on the verge of death, continuously summoned into the future for the Holy Grail because she made a deal with a counterforce. At the end of the Fate route and the Holy Grail War in the future ended, she returned to the moment of her death, calling her experience in the future a dream and deciding to die to continue that dream. So in other words, because Asat Pramad's narrative of Himeko's fate was likely not the whole truth, what Nihilix is implying here is that Himeko could possibly have the same plot as Saber, existing in a time loop where oneself always travels into the future before returning to the past to die, completing the loop suggested to us way back in year 1 of her story, and also paralleling Cyrene as well. If that's the case, then with the Catbox narrative, like Cyrene, it is the future after she returns to the past that is in the box, as in, while Saber returned to the past to die, which would be the scenario Asat Pramad told us. Himeko and Cyrene's fate after returning to the past would be undecided, which means it can still be changed if we gather enough wish power for the Elation path to change the probability of her future. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually exactly the same plot as Cyrene, just replace the Remembrance with the Elation. In any case, with the confirmation of Asat Pramad's probability manipulation, our experience in Plan Arcadia is highly likely to be cobbled together from multiple timelines, much like how Hollow Ataraxia functions in Stay Night. Ironically, Grand Order's latest main chapter also made us go through a very similar plot, just with Ortha the Norn of the past instead of Mythos. Long story short, it was also a time loop, a mental time loop to be precise, and Nasu also cracked a joke about needing to understand quantum mechanics to understand the sci-fi genre and time loop stories. I personally feel like it was friendly ribbing at Star Rail's lore for Mythos. In any case, Ortha locked the main cast in a time loop dream of sorts, where we had to repeat idealized versions of the past forever. The main cast quickly woke up from the dream and confronted Ortha because her versions were too perfect to the point it came off as odd. The 3 Norns represent the past, the present, and the future, and they are competing for the role of the true fate. Ortha here is the past, so she's actually more like Cyrene and the Remembrance, albeit her personality is much closer to Nihilix. Extrapolating from that, we can roughly see a similar distribution of past, present, and future as the 3 fates in Star Rail as well, correlating to the Remembrance, the Enigmata, and the Nihility respectively, which would align with the 3 paths as components in the modern interpretation of the Dirac equation as well. I talked about that in more detail in 4.2, so if you're interested, you can check out that video. But the short gist of it is exactly how the Approach Science lore book released in 4.2 said on the tin. Scholars hold widely divergent views on this profound issue. One school of thought maintains that in the distant past, the Dark Zone once reached the surface of the ether, causing the destruction and rebirth of the entire universe. And it is precisely because of this rebirth that the ether became omnipresent. In other words, they essentially believe that the Dark Zone has sculpted the universe into a form in which Mythos can intervene. If this holds true, then in the distant future, even after the Finality has reached its finale, it isn't impossible that Mythos could reboot the universe once more. That may just be the most mysterious and alluring aspect of the Dark Zone. In short, Mythos is a confirmed looper. Of course, this means that every time Nihilix appears and interferes with the plot, we can reasonably guess that those are the critical turning points that she had jumped into the Dirac Sea for. Some key turning points are when we used the Stellaron in 4.2 during the fight with Full Wish and traveled on the path of the Elation with Nihilix's bat. This one was highlighted again by Welt, so it's definitely suspicious. Another key turning point is the odd compositions of the 2 fights against Asat Pramad and the division between the Nameless early on in the patch. Of course, we can actually see the other possibilities for the Graphia fight right when Asat Pramad was rolling his dice, so the team division being a variable is pretty much confirmed, and this likely also spills out to whether Dan Heng accompanies Blade or not, as he stated early on in response to the Finality hexagram. A different team composition would also explain the odd teleportation move from Welt and continue the parallelism to the Alien space manga, effectively solving two birds with one stone. In addition, another key turning point is clearly whether we found the Snow Hotel and the Fake Graphia in the mountain summoning ritual, as both of those actions were guided by Nihilix the entire way through. Without Nihilix, we would not be able to decode Casper's tip, and the Fake Graphia wouldn't show up, and then the whole episode about Blade jumping into his own mentalscape would not have happened at all. Instead, with the way some scenes were clearly cut out of the Blade versus Suhu fight, in the original timeline, Blade most likely jumped into the real Maw at the abandoned train station instead, which would better put him as a parallel to us in 4.1, and the result of that would be him failing the 1 out of 10 chances to make it out of Ouroboros Maw, unlike the result that was shown to us in 4.3. Of course, since Asat Pramad himself can also manipulate probability if we take Everknight's words as true, it means that the whole scene at the tavern was also suspicious as well, considering that she claimed that the Sparksea we were talking to was actually Asat Pramad in disguise all along. Granted, that was Everknight, so we don't know for sure if she's actually spreading misinformation or not, but with how Silverwolf's song also highlighted that boss we need to fight is Sparksea, I think she has some good cases on her side here. And while the light bulb was played off as a joke, as Ashvale said, it does contain 10% of the truth, and part of what Sparksea claimed about Asat Pramad using the Ouroboros was already proven to be true by Asat Pramad himself, which of course, it would be true if Everknight's claim is correct, because the Sparksea speaking would be Asat Pramad himself. Speaking of Asat Pramad, I think I'm not the only one who thought that Himeko's confrontation with Asat Pramad was a bit stupid as far as the plan went. For one, since Himeko was already suspicious of her dad working with a Lord Ravager, why would she choose to confront him alone without any of the Astral Express crew to back her up? In addition, for some mysterious reasons, Miss Dolly is Himeko's mecha at the final cutscene, so needless to say that will need some additional explanations, but it also highlights how strongly Himeko parallels Miss Dolly's story as well. In short, there are several important turning points in the plot of Plan Arcadia itself, and we can roughly assume that there are 3 parties here who can warp reality by changing the probability of the cat box. Us as the Black Cat of Finality and a Stellaron holder, Aha as the god Elation through their masks, Asat Pramad and Sparkle, and finally Nihilix as the suspected Mythos pure child of the garden with the same plot as Orther in Grand Order. One interesting thing is that Isee and Dolly were actually confirmed to be crewmates, and it was implied that Akivili, Dolly, and Isee were the last crew members before Akivili died and Isee left the train. From Cosmeticy, we also knew that Dolly later turned into Crystal, much like March did in Amphireus, signifying that she was using her memories to loop as a pure child at the time. Incidentally, Dolly was also pink, also yapped about romanticism and loved to dance, so she was most definitely a pure child, albeit a dead one. In the main quest, Asat directly referenced her as the one who made the whale lighting of the train, and this is actually incredibly suspicious, because there was a Fuli scene acting as the lamplight of the Ouroboros during Swarm, connecting Dolly to that specific lamplight, Fuli of the Ouroboros, and through the Ouroboros, to Asat Pramad and Aha as well. In other words, I personally think that there is a rather good chance that Dolly was the original identity of Nihilix, and after she turned into Crystal, she became Mythos, took control of the garden, and started working with Asat Pramad as Aha, which would show up in Gold and Gears as the two of them trying to prevent Noose Instant and Akivili's subsequent fall, paralleling the current Nihilix and Asat Pramad's suspicious roles in the current plot for Plan Arcadia. In terms of Buddhism, the connection between Dolly and Mythos is rather strong too. I had to cut this part out back in 3.6 because the Remembrance Enigmata video was already rather long, but the short gist is that 6-phased Isa Fuli is likely a reference to the 6 paths of the samsara cycle. If you're familiar with Naruto, you probably know that the 6 paths are the possible paths in life that a person can be reincarnated in. They are usually depicted as a moon wheel, like the one behind Yao Guang, this real-life carving in China, and the Rinnegan of the Moon Goddess and the Uchiha clan in Naruto. And no, we don't count Boruto. There is no Naruto chapter after 698. Actually, we should have stopped counting Naruto chapter after Madara was bamboozled by literal aliens, and I'm reasonably certain the Hoyo writers agree with me, considering how they treat the eternal recurrence as a dream, but also a parallax truth of reality from certain points of view. Of the entire Naruto cast, I swear Madara was the only one who understood Taoist philosophy and Buddhism. Anyway, the 6 paths can also be expressed as a lotus with 6 petals, correlating to the 6-syllable mantra in Mahayana Buddhism. This is why both the Remembrance and the Enigmata have such strong connection to the moon. While the Enigmata is the moon in the water, the Remembrance is the flowers in the mirror, completing the idiom. And also why Fuli is a lotus fractured into many pure children, as each child is literally a phase of the 6-phase dice, or 6 eidolons for a character kit. In Buddhism, the material world is divided into 6 realms: Deva, Ashura, humans, animal, hungry ghost Preta, and hell. This applies to every sentient being, and the goal of Buddhism is to escape from the samsara by ascending to Buddhahood, or in this case, an aeon. For the pure children, this aeon slot is Fuli. This is different from the goal of the original Vedic religions, which push for Deva rebirth instead. In Mahayana Buddhism, the 6-syllabled mantra Om Mani Padme Hung is the most common one, and it is believed that chanting the mantra means you can purify the 6 paths. Each syllable and path is assigned a color: white, green, yellow, blue, red, and black, each a petal on the lotus. Though in Hoyo's case, they got a bit more creative with the coloring. The white petal is supposed to be the Deva realm and purify ego, but this became the gray seed, the failed experiment in Divergent Universe for Cyrene, who became white as the demiurge, but she rejected the Buddhahood of Fuli and option C to return to gray, continuing the samsara cycle. Among the 6 paths, the Deva realm is the highest and closest to the Buddha realm, but sometimes they can fall down to a lower realm and get reborn as a human, or a demigod Ashura. This is why Cyrene became Fuli pretty easily in option B. But because she chose option C in 3.7 to stay back in the samsara, she fell down and was reborn as a literal demigod Ashura. Ultimately, her final goal for herself and Amphireus is to be born as actual humans, or the human realm in 6 paths. The green petal is supposed to represent the Ashura realm, purifying jealousy and lust for entertainment. Rappa, a result of Dr. Primitive's experiment on the origin, most likely of species, has green eyes and is full-time delusional, and she is also a rapper, here for entertainment. And instead of Ashura, she pretends she's an Oni instead. The yellow petal is supposed to represent the human realm, purifying passion and desire. This should be the yellow seed, who wants to become a general, a human occupation, a mortal dream. The blue is supposed to represent the animal realm, purifying ignorance and prejudice. This should be March, the blue seed who wants to become an adventurer. In Buddhist tales like Kusanali Jataka, it's not uncommon for the past lives of Buddha to be an animal or an Aranara, according to Hoyo and Genshin. It is also for this reason that March's memories of her true self was deleted from her mind by Evernight, because she needed to be one of the ignorant animals to fit in with the rest of the Astral Express. In the fluffy blue comic, everyone is an animal in Nihilix's plot, signifying their fool's journey across the stars, unaware of Mythos machinations behind the scene. And here is where Dolly came from. Red is supposed to represent the Preta realm, which is the hungry ghost realm, purifying greed and possessiveness. In the current samsara, this slot is currently Evernight, but this slot used to be occupied by Dolly, who turned into crystal when Akivili fell. Preta are ghosts without an actual body, so they're always hungry and try to eat everything. This is Evernight as the Sea of Oblivion in Amphireus, and in Plan Arcadia, the theme of the hungry Preta featured heavily, especially in 4.1 and 4.3. Aha in 4.1 appeared as a ghost inside a mouth, luring us into their elation and pleasure inside the maw of Ouroboros, who is, of course, also a literal hungry ghost sealed in Plan Arcadia. Of course, they spread even to Evanesha as a ghost of her true self, the immortal tree sealing the husk of Ouroboros, but still seeking to enjoy life to the fullest. So despite her animal ears, Evanesha is also very much a hungry ghost as well. In 4.3, both Graphia and Blade are ghosts hanging on to their existence because they wanted to kill their Ians, something that they never managed to accomplish in their lives. Even this Ryusuke, wearing the face of Asat Pramad, is a ghost too, still yearning for the beauty of destruction, paralleling his daughter, Himeko, who still yearns for the beauty of the trailblaze beyond the starry sky. Most tellingly is actually the new enemy in 4.3, because their description was extremely on the nose for hungry ghosts. A monstrous legion created from Asat Pramad's split veracity, power, now the prototype of the Imagine. Asat Pramad sensed within the dormant core from Ahatopia an unending hunger tied to the veracity, whose pulsation resonated closely with the path of destruction. Amused by this restless force, he began his dark creation, erasing human heads, leaving only grinning, devouring mouths that howl, demand, and consume without end. So in other words, with how we already got confirmation in 4.0 and 4.2 that Mythos, as in, the pure child at the garden, is active in Plan Arcadia, it's a rather straight line to connect her to a role similar to Evernight in Amphireus, as a looper attempting to delete the true history of the place so that her fake version in the fluffy comic would become real, likely to avoid a tragic ending. Thus, through Evernight, Mythos can be connected straight back to Dolly, who is directly mentioned by Asat through the whale lighting, and who occupied the same slot of the hungry ghost among the 6 phases of ice by virtue of being dead. As a whole, you can say that Dolly being Mythos' original identity has a lot going on to it, with both direct lore evidence in game and Buddhist references. And the entire thing is shaping up to be an exercise in finding Dolly. Of course, even though there are at least 3 loopers in Plan Arcadia, it doesn't mean that they're really free to make whatever they want into reality. Just as Noose Instant still came true back in Gold and Gears against the machinations of the Elation, the Enigmata, and the Equilibrium, Yao Guang effectively plays the same role as Noose for Plan Arcadia through her divination and observation, which we have learned about since 4.0. What's interesting is that the net she is weaving in 4.3 is actually another Hindu-Buddhist reference, the Indra's net, which is the concept of a big web that contains all cause and effects. Each eye is a jewel, so that's why Yao Guang eyes have that design. Her barrier is a variation of the endless knot, which also represents the samsara and non-existence, exactly like the theme of 4.3, and another clue that Plan Arcadia is also in a bit of a samsara. Hinduism attributes the net to Indra, the god of lightning, while Buddhism attributes it to the Buddha. Girdle, Escher, Bach uses it as a metaphor for ideas in a brain or a computer. For Yao Guang case, it's from Lan as Indra and Nous as the computer. So, in other words, she can do exactly what she said on the tin, provided she is given enough preparation to cast her net and open the cat box. Of course, just because 4.3 is a warped memories doesn't mean that it's entirely worthless. Much like 2.2 and 2.3, it does contain a nugget of the truth, and it can also be seen as a parallax truth as well. Just as Ashvale told us in this quest, even if the story contains only 10% of the truth, it can still be parsed down for useful clues of the actual truth. Ultimately, with all those deliberate discrepancies of the story in 4.3, even if we don't know the full truth as of yet, what is certain is that the question for Plan Arcadia is pretty much the same as that for Penacony.
Why do you need it? Why do birds fly? Why do fish swim? Only the dying and the overfed contemplate meaning.